I will introduce our lovely speaker. So, Lisa is a speaking coach, a relationship guide, and a feminine embodiment facilitator who is really committed to fostering deeper love and connection in all aspects of life. She has over 40 years of experience and she integrates training from transformational work, consciousness studies, her, past in media performance and empowering authentic self expression to really cultivate meaningful relationships. And so today we are going to talk about connection and embodied presence. And Lisa, I will start with asking a bit about your personal journey and what inspired you to go down this path.
Wow. Well, like you pointed out, it's been a long journey. I'm going to be turning 60 in January. And so I started my personal growth journey when I was 19 or 20. And it's been a beautiful path with learning from so many different traditions and teachings. But for the purpose of our conversation today, what I think I'll focus on is the part of my process and my understanding and my growth that has been really in the last 6 years. So much of what I have explored and learned about communication and relating and connection comes from all the different traditions, but also personally from having been married for 20 years and raising children for 25 years. But I would say some of the most powerful learning has come from the last 6 years of going through a separation and divorce. And so as a part of the journey that was that initiation, really, I dove into doing some deep healing around embodiment, feminine embodiment, and what it means to be in a feminine body, and exploring all the range that is, but also healing with the masculine and understanding more, first of all, the ways in which I erred and I caused harm in my relationships, which is one of the most powerful ways to connect with what alternatives are possible, including gratitude for what was. I did a deep reconciliation process in the last number of years as I've gone down this journey with the masculine in relationship, in terms of relationship and how I showed up in it, and how I both applied the knowledge that I have about communication and relating, and the times when I didn't. And so one of the things I want most for people now is better tools for connecting and maintaining deep, powerful relationships that I consider to be epic love. And so I don't know, that's a little bit of the journey that I think I would offer as introduction. I do coach people on speaking and communication, but also, like you pointed out, in embodiment and polarity and sexual relationships. And, they seem kind of disparate because it does come from so many different parts of my background. But the truth is they all lead to the same place. And that is, how do we know ourselves fully, show up fully for ourselves in relationship, communicate desires and boundaries, and then learn how to repair and then move forward again. So, and then in that is great gratitude, because if there's anything in the world that needs healing and that has the possibility for more love, more connection, more hope, more appreciation, I think it's how we relate to each other.
Yeah, I love that, Lisa. And thank you for sharing some of your personal journey. On ShareWell, we actually have a large majority of our groups are around relationships, divorce, separation, breakups, finding yourself after, regaining confidence. We have also a big community who have, suffered narcissistic abuse too. And so this is just the perfect topic to assist with some of those. So let's start about, how about this, Lisa? Let's start with loneliness, because that is an experience that is so prevalent. And I'm curious, what do you think is at the root of this disconnection that people are feeling now?
Wow, it's so pervasive. And I'm glad that you're starting us off there, because one of the things I have learned and seen and noticed both firsthand and in people that I work with my clients, with the people that I lead and teach, with other people that I practice with, that out in the world, in terms of going back out in the world as someone who is married for 20 years and now been divorced for six, I see it in the dating world, but I also see it in relationship. And there are a couple factors. One is that we live in such a fast-paced world with so much technology. And ironically, it feels like we should be more connected because we have more tools for connection. But the truth is, we're so overwhelmed by stimulus that we can shut ourselves down in terms of our embodiment, and we do not have the tools. We live in a society that has not taught us tools for connection and for relating. And so one of the things I have noticed, specifically being back out in the dating world for the first time in my 50s, that even at even in the later half of life, when you think people would have skills, there's a great deal of missing links in terms of how we connect and how we communicate. Like, if I'm going to just be straightforward, communication skills are very lacking in our culture. And it's not surprising, because we live in a culture that doesn't specifically value and doesn't teach communication skills. You know, if there's one thing we don't learn, it's communication skills. So that's one of the reasons. I think there are other things too. I think that we are, like I say, the fast pacedness of life, the impact of technology. And don't get me wrong, I love technology. I think it can be such a powerful tool, but sometimes it can get in the way. But when you combine that with the lack of skills in even describing what we want and knowing what we want, starting with first self-awareness, the ability to communicate to another person what we want, the ability to create boundaries in ways that are open-hearted and full without amputating, because that's what happens for so many people, because they don't have the skills for communicating and maintaining boundaries, is that they'll let their boundaries be crossed and then they'll amputate the other person. So people often swing between not being clear about what they want and then completely shutting things out, rather than having the tools for expressing what's needed and important for them, maintaining them, and communicating in a loving, open-hearted way. And then the next thing is, once a boundary's been crossed or there's been a challenge, the skill set for repair is also largely missing. People do not generally have tools for seeing a difficulty and then finding ways to be heard, be understood, and then moving forward with healing. So those are just a couple of the things. There's so many opportunities for us to get deeper in our ability to relate to each other that we simply don't have in our culture.
Yeah, yeah. Very well said, Lisa. Let's dive a little bit deeper into boundaries. Um, so yeah, you mentioned the importance of being able to set clear boundaries. Do you have, when you work with clients, are there any go-to kind of pieces of wisdom that helps them to set more clear boundaries?
Mm. Well, one of the first things people need to do is navigate their own awareness, their own knowledge of their non-negotiables. And I think that sometimes when we're not clear about what our non-negotiables are, our desires and boundaries all get mushed together. And then they're harder to, it's harder to have our desires met. It's harder to have our boundaries recognized, and it's harder to communicate about them. So the first thing is, I think it's super important to know the difference between what you desire and what you want and what's a non-negotiable. So you can have a long list, so I don't know, do you have a sense of if most of the people that are with us or your population are people in relationship or single? Is it a wide mix, or just in
I
terms of?
would say, yeah, I would say more single
Okay,
skew.
great.
Mhm.
Okay, so assuming that you're single and that you maybe are looking for some kind of partnership, and that's the stage that you're in of life, in terms of being single, wanting to create something, then one of the things you can do is make a really clear, comprehensive list of what you want, but then from that list, know what is absolutely necessary. And so once you know what's a non-negotiable, then you can go into a relationship with clarity about what it's giving you, what it's offering you, and what it might be missing. And so and I'm trying to answer the question specifically about boundaries, but it also goes into completion. So I'm going to jump a little bit over to completion. If you are out in the dating world, say, or looking to connect and deepen in a relationship, when you know what it is that you want, but you also know what's non-negotiable, then it'll be easier for you to know when it is not working for you. And one of the things I see as a pattern in the world is that uh, women or feminine identified beings often want to see what they wish for, and sometimes don't recognize the truth of what's coming towards them. But if you have it really clear, it can be easier to recognize without illusion when something isn't there for you or when your boundary is being crossed. So the more clear you are about it, the more you're able to articulate it specifically, and the more able you are to recognize when your needs are not being met, the easier it is for you to see, okay, my needs aren't being met right here, even though this might be great and that might be great and I love this person and I'm attracted to them. But then you can recognize when your non-negotiables are and be able to request them in a way that has an open heart, that isn't just empty. And then you can have a lot more clarity about when it's time to end a relationship. And I'm going to jump to that for a second, because one of the things I see that I feel there's a real need for in our culture right now is the ability to complete. I see that people don't know how to complete connections. And so they end up floundering and being kind of gray, and they're not really sure if they're together, if they want to stay or not stay. And that's a recipe for such a mess emotionally. And so one of the things I love to present to people is this concept of completion, regardless of why a relationship or a connection or a text interaction or a dating interaction is ready to end, that if you can complete a relationship with 4 parts, the first one is a recognition of what was, and appreciation and gratitude for what the person brought to you, regardless of whether it was a short relationship or a long relationship or a marriage or a dating situation, but gratitude for something that you learned, something that you appreciated, something that you enjoyed, and then to thank the person for that. Thank you so much for, and it could be anything from taking me out on such beautiful dates, or the children that you gave to me, or for sharing the truth of your heart so that I could see who you really are. Or I mean, it could be anything. But the more you can identify what you appreciated about a connection and then share it open-heartedly, and then recognize, the third step is recognizing the truth of the situation. So that could sound something like, I'm seeing that our needs are not in alignment, or I recognize that the paths we're both on are going in different directions. Or it could be something like, it could be something simple like, I'm just not feeling our connection, or my senses or my intuition, this isn't the right thing for me. Right. So anything that you're recognizing as being the truth. And then the fourth thing is a goodbye, is a closing. And that could be something like, I really love to stay friends. Is that something you'd be open to? Or it could be, I wish you all the best, if you're ready to completely close it. It could be, it could really be anything. It could be whatever it is true. So that you've done these 4 things that you've said, recognize the beauty and the power of what you've gotten. You've been thankful for it and expressed gratitude. You see what's true in the moment, and then you complete. And I feel that if people had that skill, it would do so much for our hearts and our nervous systems in terms of clarity for where we are in relationship to another, whether we're the one closing the relationship or whether it's being closed against our own desire. That process can be used in either case. And then if we have that skill set, our nervous systems can feel the completion, which creates so much more opportunity for the next connection being really powerful.
I love that. I love that clearing out so that you can open up opportunity and space for new connections. And on that thread, Lisa, um, what guidance would you have for people when they're starting new connections to really deepen that connection, because there's so many connections now that are so surface level, and even with social media and all of that, and braving the world of dating, and like, how do we drop into that that depth that we're looking for?
Whew, that is such a beautiful and rich question. And I love that question, Amy, because I think it is at the heart of this whole conversation, is how do we deepen? Because I feel this, I feel so much of this conflict between what people have accessible to them in terms of their relationships and what they want. And what I see is that most people, whether they would name it as this or not, want more depth and a deeper sense of connection, but don't necessarily know how to create it. And so I think with the way that I'll answer that, there's many ways I could answer that, because I do come from the place of communication in terms of how we're talking with each other. And if I was going to go in that direction, it could be something like, what kind of questions are you asking? And there are all kinds of tools online for the questions that you ask another person to get to know them deeper, whether they're your parents or grandparents or someone that you're dating. There's a lot of tools online where you can get ideas about questions that deepen rather than surface level questions. But instead of that, what I want to talk about is, I want to talk about polarity and the energetics of connection, because I do have a deep dive in the last 3 or 4 years into feminine embodiment and polarity. And I think this is a place where we have a lot of opportunity to reconnect in our culture. We've forgotten how to be in our bodies in connection with another person. And it's funny because I was thinking yesterday about this idea in our polarity work. We call it polarizing a relationship. And that means that if I'm sitting across, I'm a feminine being, and gender doesn't matter. I could be a highly feminine being who is in a male body, or vice versa. But for the most part, I'm a feminine being. And if I'm sitting across from a masculine being, and I personally want a spark, an energetic, sexual chemistry, that kind of thing, I want that to go deep, then the more I can drop into and reconnect with my what I would call feminine energetics, or you could call it, if you don't like the word feminine, you could call it like omega or receptive, or emotional or flow. The more I can do that, then the more the person across from me is probably going to have access to their more masculine side. Not necessarily, some of it is practice. But I was thinking about the fact that sometimes when we do this in a connection with another person, and it can be through eye contact or through breath or through stillness or through deepening into the subtle movement in our spine, taking a deep breath. And maybe if you're here now, and maybe Amy, if you can practice just seeing what it feels like to take a deep breath and letting that energetic of that breath drop into your belly, and maybe feeling a little bit of the softness of your spine. And feeling how there's a certain softness and receptivity to the heart in that place. And then imagine if you were wanting to connect with someone else and they were sitting across from you, and you allowed yourself to reveal this softness and this receptivity in your body. So as you feel experience of being embodied, and even allowing your lower part of your body to have a little bit of movement, whether it's your hips or your heart opening through your body or dropping your head back a little bit, I would call this a feminine energetic. And in the olden days, people used to call that flirting. So I was thinking yesterday, we have this conversation about it being, polarity and polarizing a connection and a relationship. But really, it's sort of an old fashioned way of flirting. And what is flirting but to say, I'm authentically here in my body, and I want to be connected with you through eyes, through breath. And I'm open to receiving your attention, your energy, your connection. So that's through the lens of polarity from the feminine side. There's so much more I could say about that, but maybe that's just a little bit of something that I could offer. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you went there, Lisa, because so much when we think of connection nowadays, you're right, we think about like the questions to ask and how to intellectually connect, but that the energetics around it, um, I personally haven't spoken about that for months, if ever. And so that's so important. Thank you for bringing that to our awareness. I love
Mm-hmm.
that.
Actually,
Yeah.
if more thing I could say about that, because I don't want it to be too misunderstood. I want it to be clear that that was one little tiny piece of feminine embodiment, and how that can be a way of deepening connection with another in a, say, romantic, sexual, um, any kind of relationship, really. But let's just, there's so many things we could talk about. Let's just stay there. I know sometimes people respond to the idea of polarity or feminine embodiment, and it triggers people sometimes, either because it's associated to a gender binary that people feel is too limiting, but also because they perceive it to be saying there's only this one thing, like this receptivity, that I just tried to embody and illustrate and invite people to. But to be clear, the embodiment of the feminine can take so many different forms. And what I think is most exciting and possible in how we connect through embodiment with another is that our range is infinite in the feminine. So our embodied range in the feminine can be collie, it can be I'm desiring, I'm gonna eat you, I'm gonna, it can be very intense, right? Or it can be queen like, it can be love, open-heartedness, it can be seductress. There's so many different aspects of feminine embodiment that there are to play with, that most of us have lost touch with because we felt ourselves being narrowed into tiny little channels of a particular way of being. And so I'm really passionate about women increasingly, and there's a whole range for men too, but I'm just speaking to the feminine right now, of really fully embodying the range of who we are in our bodies energetically as a way and a means of connecting, outside of what you said, like this tendency for us to like ask the questions and go into the intellect and decide if this person is right or not right, all those.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any practices you would suggest, Lisa, to help us I guess drop into that like yeah, connective space, whether it be yeah, like an embodiment practice or something that we do, verbally to get us over that like I guess anxiety of that initially connecting with a human. Yeah.
Mm. Okay, so I'll answer that from two places. The first one is the embodiment place. First, I'll answer it from the perspective of embodiment, and then I'll answer it from the perspective of speaking. And they're very related to each other, but there's different ways in. So if you're wanting to enter into a practice for the embodied aspect of it, then breath is really important, and anything non-linear movement wise. So I recommend getting music that has the range of expressiveness, connection, all the things that I talked about. In fact, I do practices with this, and I think later we'll get a chance to talk with one I've got coming up that people can join that's free. So that's an option to do it in a container with someone else. But you can also just get on Spotify, put on some music that you like, that you find to be emotional, it could be, or sexy, or empowering, whatever the emotion is, and just put the music on. And a 3 or 4 minute practice can be simply putting on music and finding the ways your body naturally wants to move to it as you breathe into it. So combining the breath and the body, ideally in non-linear movement for the feminine, for 3 to 4 minutes to a favorite song is a perfect and easy way to connect with the embodiment piece. You can also do the same thing if you want to ground more into the masculine, and that might be a different type of music and a different type of breath work that might be more like a breath of fire. I'm going to leave that for now. But then in terms of speaking and how you're communicating, I teach the concept of speaking in the feminine and speaking in the masculine as very distinct ways of speaking that everyone has access to and everyone can benefit from, especially if they know when they're doing each and choose it appropriately. So I'll illustrate that a little bit. So I consider speaking in the feminine also to be coming from this place of softness in the spine and a little bit of movement, that is thinking out loud and creatively exploring what you might think and bringing an idea forward and then considering another part of it. It's a creative, explorative way of speaking. So if someone was to ask me a question on a date, say, what is something that you love, or tell me about anything, it could be anything, that if I can go a little bit to the softness at the base of my spine as I'm speaking and drop myself energetically into a flow state as I'm speaking the answer, it doesn't have to be obvious. Like the person doesn't have to see me going, oh, I'm in my feminine, but it can be so subtle, a way of me connecting to that softness. Whereas I'm on a job interview, say, and I want a different type of connection that's not that. I want to speak in the what I call the masculine, which is direct, clear, concise, to the point, and lands the period clearly and authoritatively with confidence. So that's another example of how you can use both embodiment and speaking combined to create the kind of connection that's appropriate for the moment. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for being so thorough and focusing on different angles of it. But yeah, Lisa, just thank you so much for this incredible talk. For those of you that want to follow Lisa, maybe you want to ask those questions directly. She does have a free feminine embodiment call. I put the link in there. And then also, Lisa, do you want to speak to your embodiment lab for couples and singles? I put that link in as well.
Oh, great. Thank you. Yeah, there's two perfect offerings to stay connected. The free feminine embodiment is a lot of what I've talked about today. It's going to be a practice of connecting with the body in as a basis for what our experience is as feminine beings, to feel all those feelings. But then once we're in that place, then it's a beautiful place from which to connect with a partner. And so Embodiment Lab is a 3-hour. In December, it's going to be an online version. In January, we'll have an in-person version in San Francisco, but online because we want to make it accessible to more people. And it's led by me and my collaborator, whose name is Speed Weed. And we bring people together to create connection, and you'll get a chance to go into breakout rooms and create connection exercises. And then the masculine practitioners will do an embodiment practice with Speed, and the feminine practitioners will do an feminine embodiment practice with me. And then you'll come back and you'll be pinned and partnered with an opposite gendered or energetic partner to explore going through. It's kind of, I would call it almost like a dyadic meditation or a partnered meditation, where you look left eye to left eye into the person in the screen, and it's amazing what you can experience in terms of connection, even though it's on Zoom, in a pinned practice. And you'll be walked through the experience of, for the feminine beings, being in a feminine energetic, and the masculine being in a masculine energetic, and then experiencing the connection that's possible there, so that you can see into the heart of the opposite gender. And yeah, that's December 15th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Zoom online. And if you put the link there, there's more information. And I'd love to see some people from this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that, Lisa. It sounds like such a juicy offering. So yeah, for those of you wanting some more connection in your life, Lisa is a master at this. I also put in, she does one-on-one personal communication coaching as well. So please check her out. And then thank you, audience, for showing up today, for yourself, prioritizing your mental health, learning from these incredible experts. And Lisa, again, thank you so much for your wisdom. Like, I really feel like the loneliness epidemic is one of the biggest problems in society now, and you are directly combating that with your work. And so thank you for all you are doing for humanity.